Okay, hey everybody. Sorry about the delay. We had a little problem with the technology, of course. These things never work out right. But welcome. Thank you for being here tonight. This is our first live broadcast for Ladari Outreach. We are starting a new series tonight called Great Catholic Books. That's our hashtag right there. And we hope you'll enjoy this series and you'll come back for more. If you're new to this channel, please click that subscribe button because we upload new material all the time, material that'll be great for helping you grow in your faith. If you're one of our regular subscribers, thank you for being here. Please share this video and this feed with your friends on social media to help us grow this ministry. Use the hashtag Great Catholic Books, please. And so tonight we're going to talk about the introduction to the Devout Life, one of my favorite books, probably my favorite book. It's not really realistic for us to get through this whole book, but in flipping through it, I found some things at the beginning that I'd like to share. So we'll go through that. Stay through to the end because we'll have Q&A. If you have any questions about this book or about the ministry, you'll have an opportunity to share at that time. But right now, if you are in the chat with us right now, go ahead and comment where you're watching us from. If you're watching this on the replay later, go ahead and comment where you're at. Let us know where you are and who you are, and introduce yourself so we get a chance to get to know you. Bear with me as I learn how all this stuff works. I'm not really sure how some of the software works. It's kind of new to me. But anyways, okay, so this book, love this book. I've given a number of talks on this book before, and I was kind of prepping for this talk today, and you kind of go through the motions when you do things over and over again. But today something really kind of struck me when I was going through this, and I honestly, I think I got through to page 15 or something, and that's probably how far I'll get in this video. But this book, at one point in the past, it really impacted me big time. It really impacted me, and since then I've given a number of talks about it because of the huge impact it had on me. But today, it kind of, I guess the things that struck me once before struck me in a new way today. And so I wrote down those things. I want to share that with you. But that's what this series is all about. When we talk about great Catholic books, we're not just talking about, hey, I read a book, I liked it, here, let me share it with you. We're talking about books that changed your life, books that had an impact on you, books that challenged you to grow spiritually, that took you to the next level, that brought Christ closer to you, brought you to a deeper understanding of what it means to be a fervent Catholic, which is the topic of this book. So as we're talking tonight, in the comments, we plan on doing more of these Great Catholic Books series. Write down what books, comment on what books impacted you, what Catholic book impacted who you are and has made you who you are. And don't just comment, don't just write the name of the book, but comment how it impacted you. Share that with us because, we're going to need ideas. I mean, I've got like 3 or 4 or 5 books over here, so, I guess we'll run out of books eventually. So, if you haven't read this book or you're interested in it, I think the link should be in the description below me if all of this stuff works the way it's supposed to. If not, I'll put it in there later, but there should be a link to Amazon from here. It's a different edition. This edition apparently is out of print, and apparently this isn't the best edition. Apparently the one that I've got linked is better, from what I understand. I haven't read that edition. They're different translations, but okay. So anyways, comment on what books have changed your life or impacted your faith, and let's get into this book. I want to talk about just 2 or 3 points I want to make from this book that are pretty deep for me anyways. From time to time in the history of our church, the laity in our faith get the impression somehow, I don't know if it's part of their culture or what, but catechesis, I don't know, I don't even want to make that commentary, but for whatever reason, the laity get this impression that holiness, what Saint Francis de Sales calls the devout life, that holiness is only for a select few, for nuns and monks, for priests. And because we, the laity, are living, in the world, we're living in a home, going to a job every day, raising our families, that holiness is not necessarily something that we're called to. And I think here in the year 2017, I don't think that thought is very prevalent now among Catholics, but I think if you go back 10, maybe 20 years in this church, it was a whole lot more prevalent. Back at Vatican II, the church actually spoke to this in Lumen Gentium, chapter 5. The church called us to a universal call of holiness, and I think we, the laity, over the last few generations, have begun to respond to that call, and we hopefully are trying to grow in our faith and become virtuous and holy. I'll throw in the famous quote of Mother Angelica: "We are all called to be saints. Don't miss the opportunity." Very powerful quote. So, St. Francis de Sales, he wrote this book. He lived at the time of the Reformation in the 16th century. At that time, that same idea was kind of prevalent among the laity. They were of the thought that holiness was for nuns and monks and priests, and that they, as Catholic Christians, were not necessarily called to a virtuous life. And that may have contributed to the Reformation in some degree. I don't know. That's above my pay grade, above my education, but it's definitely worth considering. But St. Francis de Sales, with this book, I guess I don't have to hold it all night, right? With this book, he did something that was quite unique for the time, and looking back through history was kind of unique through the history of our church. He wrote this book for the purpose of teaching the laity how to become holy. He does make the preface at the beginning that he himself he's not holy. He doesn't view himself as holy, but that he is trying to help people become holy. So now, that being said, he is a saint and a doctor of the church. So this book was really powerful. Let me read a quote from here. Sorry, my notes are a mess. Okay. I could almost read the whole book, it's so rich. At the time of creation, God commanded plants to bring forth fruits, each one according to its kind. In the same way, he commands Christians, the living plants of his church, to bring forth the fruits of devotion, each according to his station and vocation. Devotion, the spiritual life, must be exercised in different ways, by the gentleman, the worker, the soldier, the servant, the prince, the married woman, the widow or the widower, and the young. Not only is this true, but the practice of devotion must also be adapted to the strength, temperament, activities, and duties of each person. It is proper for a bishop to Is it proper for a bishop to want to live a solitary life like a Carthusian, or for a married man to want to own no property like a Franciscan, for the skilled laborer to spend as much time in a church as a Trappist, for a religious to be constantly at the service of his neighbor as a bishop is? Such a spiritual life would be preposterous, confusing, and indeed impossible. So he's saying here that each one of us is called to a particular type of holiness based on our state in life, and that we, the laity, should not look towards these other vocations, such as a monk, and compare ourselves or compare our lifestyle to their lifestyle, or the type of prayer that they engage in, or the type of sacrifices they make as the type of prayer and lifestyle and sacrifices that we should make. That our state in life as the laity is unique, and it's particular. And so he goes throughout this book kind of detailing what a life might look like for somebody who is pursuing holiness. So the next question is, what does holiness mean to him? He uses the phrase "the devout life" over and over again, and we're more accustomed to using the word the phrase holiness, and theologians might even use a virtuous life. But so, what does he mean by holiness? I love this quote. Try to envision this as I read this. Ostriches do not fly. Chickens fly in a faltering fashion, but eagles, doves, and robins fly aloft, swiftly and frequently. Sinners do not fly up to God, but lie mired in the earth filled with earthly objects. Good people who have not as yet achieved devotion fly towards God by their good works, but do so seldom or slowly. Devout souls ascend to him promptly, more frequently, and go on to lofty heights. In fact, devotion is simply that spiritual agility and vivacity by which charity works in us, or through which we work. And this is the key: quickly, cheerfully, and lovingly. And I've seen some translations use the words carefully, frequently, and quickly, which I like those words better. So, as a fervent Catholic, living a fervent Catholic life, or a virtuous life, a holy life, the devout life, St. Francis de Sales is telling us that we should respond to God carefully, frequently, and quickly. And when I read that word quickly stuck out to me, because that's where I have probably the biggest problem. I would really like to drag my feet and really put God off for 2 weeks while I think about what he's asking me to do. That's where I struggle. And I think that might also affect my ability to respond to him frequently, because I'm holding him off so much. I think perhaps carefully, maybe too carefully, maybe that's my excuse for not moving quickly. So I'm going to repeat those again. And I want you to think, which one of those do you struggle with when you're responding to God? Is it responding carefully, frequently, quickly? Write down in the comments, if you don't mind, which one of those is your biggest struggle. Do you struggle the same as I do, quickly, or do you have your own particular struggle? So, and kind of meditate on that. That is the first thing I grab out of this book. To me, it's pretty deep, and that's enough to reflect on and kind of make the commitment. He asks you in this book to go through these transformations and make these changes in your life. And for me, it was to try to respond more quickly to God and not hesitate. All the baggage of this world is something that could really cause us to really drag our feet as we're attracted to all of the things we're attracted to. So, if you're just joining us, welcome. We're talking about the introduction to the Devout Life, and this is Ladari Outreach on YouTube, and this is our new program we have called Great Catholic Books. We've got the hashtag over here, Great Catholic Books. I'm sorry that it's on a poster, but I don't know how to use all the software yet, so bear with us as we try to figure this whole thing out. If you'd like to get a copy of this book, a link should be in the description below me. And I would ask that you would subscribe to our channel, because we are always putting up new material to help you grow in your Catholic faith. So I'm sorry I keep looking over here at all my notes. So the next thing I want to talk about is probably the 95% of this book that really impacted me, and it really is. I've got a paper clip in the middle of the book. I don't know if I can. I mean, that's it. This is the bulk of this book, the meat of this. It really just grabbed me and changed me. And he uses a term called purgation, and we know that as the struggle that we go through to grow in our faith, the struggle that we go through to grow in virtue, the effort that we make to try and become better, to increase our degree of holiness. The words escape me, but he goes through this and he breaks this down into 3 areas. And as I read this, I immediately was able to identify which one of these stages I was stuck in. And many of these saints, they use these different levels, these different stages, these different castles, and they have all these different illustrations. One's not better than the other. They are all very useful, so don't get hung up on one or the other. However, this one really grabbed me at a time when I really needed it. But anyways, to get to it and stop going in circles around it, he identifies that growing in holiness, one must first go through the purgation of mortal sin to overcome mortal sin in our lives. Number 2, to overcome the affection for sin. I'm going to go back over these in a second. And number 3, to overcome the affection to venial sin, which he says you never purely overcome. They will always remain with you in this life. So I'm going to go back through them, but before I go through, I want to inject or read another one of his quotes. He says, and this had a huge impact on me, the slow cure is the sure cure. He lists a number of famous saints, St. Paul, St. Mary Magdalene, St. Catherine of Genoa, that had these miraculous instant conversions. But he explains that that is not the norm, that the norm for humanity is to have a slow, trudgingly, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly conversion, because those slow conversions are, he says, the slow cure is the sure cure. And I'm going to read his words rather than trying to paraphrase for him. He says, a slow cure, they tell us, is always the surest. Diseases of the soul as well as the body come racing along on horseback, but leave slowly and on foot. In this enterprise, we must have courage and patience. It is sad to see some who perceive themselves still subject to imperfections after striving to be devout for a while, and then begin to be discouraged and dissatisfied and subject to the temptation of giving up and going back to their old life. On the other hand, are not those souls also in extreme danger, who by contrary temptation think themselves cleansed of every imperfection on the first day of the purgation, and regard themselves as already perfect before they have scarcely begun, then try to fly without wings? They are all in great peril of relapse by being away from their physician's care too soon. I botched a bunch of words in there, I'm sorry. I guess I'm still learning to read. So he encourages us by saying that the slow cure is the sure cure, and not to expect overnight miracles that God doesn't work that way normally because of the possibility that one may not be strong enough and falter, or be too overconfident and fall back into their old life. So he says that this purgation is a lifelong process. But it is important, as we go back to those three stages, to get through the first stage as quickly as possible, because that first stage is the stage in which we are still struggling with mortal sin. This book was such an impact on my life because at the time this book fell into my hands, I was going through this cycle of repeated mortal sin, and I couldn't break out of it. It was this thing where I was having half-hearted confessions every Saturday at 4:30, and then just because of the habitual lifestyle that I had, I would fall back into it, and then Saturday would come and I would make this wholehearted confession I really intend, but it was just the tiredness of the struggle that kind of pulled me back. The toil of every single day. So, most important in this walk is to get past that stage, because we will never have growth until we put that stage of slavery to mortal sin behind us. So, he recommends to go to have a general confession. And a general confession, I know in theory, not in practice, I've never had a general confession. General confession is one in which you schedule time with the priest to go back through your life methodically from the beginning and go through in the detail that you might not do in a regular weekly confession that you make. So that's the way he recommends to address the habit of mortal sin. Now, the next level that you would come to, and I guess these levels blur over each other too, is the affection for sin. This is huge, because it really kind of gives us a temperature for the heart. The love of God in our heart. Where is that love? The affection for sin simply means that even though I have had my conversion experience and I have left mortal sin behind, I still find it attractive. And if it were not a sin, or if by some way I could get away with it, I would certainly love to go back to my old lifestyle. That is not the ideal position that we want our hearts to be in. Sin, from mortal sin all the way to venial sin, offends our God. It offends His heart, and it is incumbent upon us to grow in love of Him and never ever want to break His heart in even the slightest ways. So at this stage, which may possibly be the most difficult stage, or the most difficult purgation — I probably shouldn't use the word stage, purgation is probably the best word. This purgation is possibly the most difficult, because there are so many things due to our fallen nature on this world, in this life, that are attractive to us. Things like, food and sex and, shiny objects, all these things that we're just naturally attracted to because of our fallen nature. And, as a Christian, you might step back and say, oh, I'm not going to do that, or I'm not going to go there, or I'm going to avoid that opportunity for temptation. But if in our hearts we still think, wow, I wish I could, or boy, I would like to, this is an area that much growth can take place. So, what does St. Francis de Sales recommend? So this is the most powerful part of this book, I think, and it really is just a few pages. It's this treasure from hundreds of years ago, and the modern times has to know about this book. just because of these few pages. These few pages could save the world if people would take the time to read them. He recommends meditations, and he has 10 meditations in here. And when I first heard about this, I was listening to a talk. It was actually by Dr. Ralph Martin, who I absolutely love, and he has a ton of credibility with me. So when he said that these meditations were very powerful, I took his word for it. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, all of these things I've been struggling with my whole life, reading, 10 half pages, 10 pages is going to cure. Well, I got the book. Amazon couldn't ship it fast enough to me because I was so eager to read these 10 pages. And it absolutely transformed my life. And I'm gonna share in a moment how I used them. I think he instructs. It's been many years, but I think he instructs you how to use them. But they were immensely powerful, immensely life-changing meditations, and it might have been an opportunity for me to learn that Christian meditation is a very powerful form of prayer, and maybe something that I didn't engage in a whole lot before, and if I had, I wouldn't have been struggling with all the sins I was. So I'm going to speak about that a little bit more, but I want to go on to the third purgation, which is the affection to venial sin. So after the 10 meditations, the rest of the book is his description of different scenarios or different aspects of life in which you might struggle, and he makes recommendations on how to deal with those circumstances. But he does make it clear that in this life we will never fully purge the attraction to venial sin. But he does make it clear that it is really important to make the effort and to constantly be trying, because venial sin has the possibility of interfering with God's work in our lives, God's grace, consolations, growth in virtue. So what I want to say is that this was the 10 meditations in particular. For me and for my spiritual growth, it was a game changer, and it really helped me overcome it. It helped me get over the hill. So I want to ask you, in the comments, is there a book or meditation or devotion that you've had that was a game changer for you, that helped you get to the next level of growth in your spiritual life? So put that in the comments, and then what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about these meditations and this book, about how I applied this. What did my use of this book look like? Because if you sat down with this book, or let me say, if I sat down with this book and I read this book the way I read every other book, which is to, page after page, chapter after chapter, try to knock it out in a week, 2 weeks, it would not have had the impact on me that it had on me. What I did was I took the book with me. I actually started at the meditations. I didn't start on the first page. I started at the meditations, and I went to our church every morning. I sat before the Blessed Sacrament, and I read only that meditation, and I prayed through that meditation, and I made this meditation was my morning prayer, and I really spent time on it, really digesting it, really internalizing it, and making it a part of who I am for that day. After the 10 days of going through these meditations, I was left with the rest of the book. And when it came to the rest of the book, I had this habit, this procedure of using this book as a prayer devotional. So I maintained that for the remainder of the book. When I would come to a particular section, I would only read that section that day. And there's small sections, like a page, page and a half, something like that. So it wasn't something I was reading, it was something I was praying. And that is definitely how I would encourage you to use this book, more like a prayer devotional and not something you sit down and you read through, because you run the risk of missing everything, all of the gold. It needs to, what it is, it needs to transform your heart, and you need to give it that time to do that. You need to allow God's grace to impact you and to change you and to transform you. So that's what I'll recommend. If you are new to the channel, you just tuned in, ask you to subscribe. We upload a lot of new material a couple times a week. We have some reflections and some devotions, and we're trying to always do something new and exciting to help you grow in your Catholic faith and grow closer to God. If you have suggestions on how we can do that, or suggestions on any of the videos that we've had, feel free to also put that in the comments. Again, also comment what has been a game changer for you in your spiritual growth, and that is as far as I'm going to go tonight in the introduction to the Devout Life. But if you have any questions, about the introduction to Devout Life, you can put them in the comment section. Or if you have any questions about our ministry or our videos that we do, one question that we get a whole lot is, what's going on with Man vs. Cave? If you haven't seen Man vs. Cave, check that out on, a little promotional here. Check that out on our channel, Man vs. Cave. So it's probably one of our more popular shows, but unfortunately we are unable to broadcast right now because I moved, and at my old home we had a nice little studio set up in the garage, which is the man cave that you saw in that show. And so when we moved, I had to tear the whole thing down, and now we do not have a studio in the new house yet. So I am anxiously, as quickly as possible, trying to construct a new YouTube studio in the new garage so that we can continue with that show. But keep watching the old ones on rerun until we can. We're trying to do something else on the side so that we can keep that show running. It's kind of unfortunate to have the show just come to a complete stop, because we built up a lot of momentum with that show. So all right, so again, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, and we're going to do this next week. Let's see, hold on. Next week's book, 33 Days to Morning Glory, very popular book right now, and we are doing it now, or next Monday anyways, in honor and celebration of the 100th anniversary of the Fatima apparitions, which will be that Friday. And we thought, hey, let's do a Marian book, and you probably might even be doing the 33 days right now anyways. My wife is. So we'll talk about this. There should be a link in the description to get this book if you are interested, and if not, I'll get that link in there on the replay. So I want to thank everybody for watching. Be sure to comment, subscribe, and thank you guys. You guys have a good night. God bless.